survived a devastating fire and recovered from third-degree and second-degree burns over 65% of his body. Lieutenant Joe Morgan is a retired firefighter who has an incredible story of resilience. I'm Crystal Bailey, host of Rise to the Call, and I was fortunate enough to speak with Lieutenant Morgan about his recovery after the infamous Cherry Road fire in Washington, D.C. He made it out alive despite losing two other firefighters in the line of duty, firefighters Lewis Matthews and Anthony Phillips. He shares how the house fire in 1999 changed his life.
Fire department.
Yes, 3146 Cherry Road. Fire in the basement townhouse.
That basement townhouse.
Yes.
3146.
3146.
Oh, okay, we'll check it out then.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Joe Morgan, for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Crystal. It's good to see you, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
You know, I spent some time in Washington, D.C., and I know a lot about the Cherry Road fire being a really momentous fire. The fire department lost two firefighters that day.
Yes.
You were there. You know, you've got the firsthand experience. I'd love to hear from you, your recollection of the events at that house fire.
1999 was a hard year for Washington, D.C. Lou Matthews was my co-worker, my partner on the engine that night, and he was one that succumbed to his injuries. And we were on the first floor, still searching for the fire. When we initially made entry, there was a lot of black smoke, a lot of heat that we were confronted with. So while we were inside looking for the fire, and I was visually searching, and I turned over to my left-hand side, and a flash of flame blew through the basement door. And then that visibility was completely gone at that point. And the heat that was on us was incredibly hot. We had never experienced anything like that before. So the NIST report that was done after, the investigative report, determined that the temperature in the room had risen to 1,500 degrees. So the second fallen firefighter, who we know as Tony Phillips, it is believed that he was directly in front of the door at the time when the heat came through the basement door, rolled across the ceiling, went to the back wall, and then came back on Lou Matthews. So I was in between the two of them. I was in there for approximately 2.5 minutes. I had second and third degree burns over 65% of my body. And unfortunately, Lou Matthews ended up being in that environment for 20 minutes. Once I made it out of the building, the RIT team was activated and they went to look for Lou Matthews, but at the time they found Tony Phillips. And so they brought him out. And that's why Lou was still there, because they realized that they still had another downed firefighter. So they had to go back in to search for Lou.
Tell me if any civilians or people in the house that were not firefighters passed away in that fire, or was it only line of duty deaths?
There was only line of duty deaths.
So no one was at the home?
The residents were in the home, and they were the ones that actually, well, their neighbor actually initiated the call for communications to let us know that there was a house fire. The homeowners smelled the smoke. They came downstairs. They noticed the smoke coming from the basement, and they exited the house through the front door. And they went to a neighbor's house, and the next door neighbor called the fire in.
So you guys knew you were going in with nobody in the house?
At that time, we didn't know if there were residents in. We just knew that we were hit with a lot of heat and smoke, and we wanted to find the source of the fire.
Tell me a little bit about what was going on through your head after you received all that heat. Did you know you were injured? What was going on?
At the time, I didn't know that I was injured. I just knew that I was burning. And I had been in hot fires before, so I really wasn't concerned about injury at the time. I was really concerned about cooling the room down so that it wouldn't flash.
So talk to me a little bit about that recovery period for you. How long did it take?
It was a difficult journey. I spent 2.5 months in Washington Hospital Center that summer. So pretty much from May 30th until I came home on August 23rd, 2 days before my birthday. There were a lot of surgeries that I went through while I was there. But I think I had somewhere around 15 surgeries while I was in the hospital. And many of those surgeries in the early stages were life-saving surgeries. And then it got to a place where, okay, now that he's beyond, possibly the infectious stage or catching infection from such large open wounds, then they started to focus on some of the smaller surgeries that I needed. For instance, my fingers, I've met so many burn survivors over the years, through volunteer and just different organizations, and many of them lose their fingers, lose their hands. So I was so blessed that I had the team that worked with me the way they did. But one of the things that really kept me driven was I had two young children at the time. I had a young son who was about 13 going on 14 at the time. Well, he may have already turned 14. And a young daughter who was 3 going on 4. And so they had their picture pinned on a curtain that stood beside my bed. And so every morning at 7 a.m., they would come in, they would take me out of the room, they would take me and bathe me and bring me back and bandage me. Even with the pain medication, some of that was still very painful to go through. And I can recall there was a point in time when the nerve endings in my back started to grow back, areas where they decided to let it heal naturally. And the nerve endings were coming back and they were so raw to the touch. And so I would lay on my side towards my children's pictures, tears running down my face, but the whole time thinking, I have to get home to them. Death is not an option. And I have to get home to them. And that was one of the things that really kept me driven. The other thing was my family and my now wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. And she was there at the hospital pretty much every single day. My family would come, friends, the fire department was so good. They would visit often. I was surrounded with so much positivity. That's really, really what kept me going. And then, by all means, I can't leave out my Lord and Savior God. He keeps me. He was the one that gave me the strength to do it all. I couldn't do it without him.
I'm also a person of faith, so I can't even let this conversation go without saying that it's clearly a miracle. So talk to me a little bit about your return, where you kind of ended up at the backside of your career.
Yes. I was around 8 years seasoned firefighter by the time the incident occurred. And I spent the year and a half getting back to work. And then I spent from October 2000 until October 2004 at the training academy. And I was training firefighters and I was training instructors on how to teach the curriculum of firefighting and or EMT. And then once I was there and I started to understand my role and being able to impart some of my background into what the firefighters were learning, I actually ended up being one of their, believe it or not, I was the physical fitness trainer for a while. I think that inspired a lot of them because of the condition that I was in or what I had come through. But I did not back down from the challenge. And so I really enjoyed that. And then I had to challenge myself at some point. And while I was training, the firefighters towards the end would go to what we call Burn Week, where we would take them out to Alexandria and they would go through the practice of live burns. The whole while I'm thinking, I need to do this because I can't tell them to go into the fire if I'm not willing to go into the fire. I had to get past the fear myself. And so, I lay there and I watched the flames roll over the ceiling, and it was reminiscent of what I had experienced before, but it was in a total different capacity, and it allowed me to get to a place of I can do this.
Did you ever have like survivor's guilt? Did you ever feel, some level of like remorse or deep mourning in the midst of all of this?
Absolutely. It took a long time to get beyond that. But I can remember while being in the hospital, just once, on one hand, reliving it and, having that dream over and over and over again, that night over and over again. And there was a point in time where one of my instructors from the academy came to visit me at the hospital one day, and I was just in tears, sharing how remorseful I was about the fact that Lou Matthews had passed, and did I do enough? What could I have done differently? And so he reassured me, and comforted me to say that, if I had done anything different than what I did, then they would have had 3 funerals instead of 2. The thing that I did, which actually gave Lou his best chance, was talked about what we needed to do with each other, pulled the room down to give us a chance to actually make an exit. And then once I got outside, to tell the crew where they could find him. So if he hadn't made it out yet, they would know where to go get him. So, but still, even after that, it was years before I actually got beyond that guilt.
It's clearly a miracle, not just that you have, these training methods brought right to you in the moment that
Yes.
saved your life, but also that the recovery period, you were able to stay mentally strong and resilient and come back and train other firefighters.
Yeah.
So it's really, I would say that it's a miracle, and it's really a great blessing that you're able to share your story and your testimony for people.
I believed in God, but I wasn't a believer. So if that makes sense, I wasn't actively living my life, a godly life at the time. So both Lou Matthews and Tony Phillips were both saved men. They were living a life of God. I wasn't. So the title of my book that's coming is long overdue, but it's called Twice Saved from the Fire. And so it talks about being saved from the physical fire and being saved from eternal fire.
Talk about the things that changed after this event for the fire department. Were there any changes in training? Were there any ways they used this event to redirect the way they instructed in the training academy?
At the time, all firefighters didn't wear radios, only the officers. So that was a change. That was a big change, because now you had firefighters that were able to make communication if they got into trouble. We did some additional trainings called Save Your Own and Ladder Bailout. And these were all trainings that were specifically designed for firefighters who were getting in trouble and giving them a way of escape.
Can you talk a little bit about, the injuries? Did they prevent you from carrying on firefighter duties? In what capacity?
So the injuries, the doctors were very concerned with me being more susceptible to heat stroke, or not being able to feel the rise in temperature, because on the skin grafted areas, you don't really have the nerve endings at the surface. The fear was by the time I felt that I was burning, it would be way too late, and I would be more susceptible to injury. So that's what they determined why I couldn't go back to firefighting. But yeah, I was still determined that I was going to do it in spite of what they said. And that's why I found it so necessary to go into the burn building with the recruits to test myself.
Can you, Lieutenant, describe your homecoming after you left the hospital and the day you were able to return home to your family?
I can. It was so welcomed, and my family was there, and they loved on me. They welcomed me home, and They took care of me for a period of times. And then we had to go into the transition of home care and, having nurses come out and, change bandages and things like that. Learning how to do some of the things that I used to do on my own. Just being able to brush my hair or hold the phone to my ear. I can remember the first time I was able to tie my shoes, and I called everybody to say, hey, I tied my shoes on my own. It was just those little victories. But, being there with my children, back with them and Kim, and we're a blended family. So her children and, all of them not having to spend their life coming to the hospital. It was a big relief for everybody. And then, once I got home, I just knew I was going to be okay. I didn't really doubt it in the hospital, but once I was home, I knew I was okay, and God had it.
And I'd love to hear if there's anything, a nugget or a piece of inspiration or encouragement to members of the fire service.
One of the recruits said, "You're always giving pearls. You give us these
Pearls. That's a better word.
Better word, pearls." So I came up with an acronym. I call it my own, but it's AWARE, being aware, AWARE. So the A standing for attitude, right? We have to have the right attitude going into any situation. And this is just not just fire ground. This is for life. And that makes a difference on how you approach situations. The W being for will. If you're having a strong will to do the right thing, or a will to do change, and that choice is up to you. The second A is for adaptability and being able to adapt to whatever situation you're in. So when firefighting, fires change. You can go thinking you're going to have one thing, and as we experienced at Cherry Road, it can change so quickly, and it'll change in a split second. And so you have to be able to adapt and adjust and make the necessary adjustments. The R being for resolve or resilience. You have gone through the attitude, you've gone through the will, you have adapted. Now you have to resolve to, okay, what's the solution? What am I going to do? And then the E is for execute. Make sure that you do whatever it is that you have to do in order to have the right outcome, the positive outcome, even in a negative situation. And if you do it with excellence,
It's an extra E there.
there's an extra E. So that's a aware E.
I appreciate you spending so much time with us, and thank you for your openness and all the stories and anecdotes. Yeah, you have a great well of knowledge and wisdom about not just the fire service, but also the recovery, the opportunity to take what was hard and overcome. So
Thank you.
yeah, I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you reaching out to me. That was unexpected, but I'm so glad that you did. And I'm glad that we had the chance to talk about it. And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
25 years after the house fire that nearly took his life, Lieutenant Morgan still spends time with firefighters in training. He's sharing his story and giving those pearls of wisdom that hopefully inspire you to rise to the call. Thanks for watching.